Pure imaginary numbers and complex numbers. Thereafter, we're going to discuss about the addition of complex numbers. So a pure imaginary number is the square root of any negative number. The square root of any negative number is what we call a pure imaginary number. For example, the square root of -1, or the square root of -5, or the square root of -9. These are what we call pure imaginary numbers, the square root of a negative number. So it is convenient to introduce the symbolic I. Mathematicians developed a symbol which is I, which is equals to the square root of -1. So if we have the square root, let's say square root of -5, this can be equals to according to SADS, evaluation of SADS, this can be written as +5 multiplied by -1, the square root of +5 multiplied by square root of -1. So since they introduced this I, which is equals to the square root of -1, then our square root of -5 can be written as I, which is the square root of -1 multiplied by the square root of +5. So this is the same as that one there. So we just expressed this pure imaginary number in this form, where I is the square root of -1. So a complex number, it is a number of the form x plus iy, where x and y are real numbers, and the I there is equals to the square root of -1. So this x is called, the x part is called the real part, and the y part there is called the imaginary part. So complex numbers are denoted by a small letter z. So a complex number is equals to x plus iy, where x is the real part and this y is the imaginary part. And what you should know is that the real part cannot be combined with the I term. The term which has that I, the imaginary part, cannot be added with the real part. For example, if you have 2 plus 3i, so this number is already in its simplest form. You cannot add these two. Okay, so complex numbers can be equal. So if two complex numbers are equal, like if we have this complex number here, which is x plus iy, and p is equals to a plus ib, these two complex numbers are said to be equal provided that x there is equals to a here, and this b here is equals to that y there. Then that complex number is said to be equal. So addition of complex number. How can we add complex numbers? So if you have two complex numbers, so to add complex numbers, what you should know is that we add the real part with the real part, and imaginary parts with the imaginary parts. For example, add the following complex numbers. We have the first one, which is 5 plus 8i by 3 plus 4i. And number 2, we have 9 plus 23i by 7 minus 10i. So let's start by adding those two complex numbers there. Remember, don't forget that we add the real parts with the real part and imaginary part with the imaginary part. So for I, we have this complex number which is added to that complex number. So let z represent our first complex number, and let w represent our second complex number. So what you do is, if we add z plus w, then we are going to add this part in brackets here plus this part here, which is our w. So adopting the rule which says we add the real and the real part with the real part and the imaginary part with the imaginary part, what you're going to do is that you open the brackets first, then from there you add the real part with the real part. So we're going to have 3 plus 5 there, and then from there you also add the imaginary part with the imaginary part. So we're going to have, if you factorize I, we are going to have 8 plus 4, which is 12i, and the real part is 8. So our answer for those two complex numbers will be 8 plus 12i. So let's move on to number 2, which is 9 plus 23i added to 7 minus 10i. So we do the same, we use the same method where we say z is equals to the first complex number and w is equals to the second complex number. Remember, these letters, you can use any letter of your choice, but as long as you follow the steps, then you are going to arrive at the right answer. So since we are adding this part, which we represent by z plus w, then we are going to have our z, which is this part, put it in brackets there, plus this part here, which is our w. Then from there we open these brackets. So to open these brackets, we are going to have the first part the way it is, but the second part it will be positive 7 minus 10i. So we add the real part with the real part, and this one, which is the imaginary part, we add it to the imaginary part. So to do that, we are going to have 9 plus 7, and then you factorize the I, then you are going to have 23, then this one is negative, so it will be negative 10. So you are going to have the sum of 16 plus 13i. So that's how to add complex numbers. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe. Remember, when you subscribe, you won't miss any of my videos, and leave your comment concerning this video.